showtime.
It's showtime. And here we go.
Welcome into another episode of the Movie Geek Podcast. I'm your host, George T., and this is my review of Alien Earth. Yes, this was quite a departure from the movies, and I think it was pretty well done. Noah Hawley did a magnificent job in telling a completely different story, but still keeping the xenomorph alien intact. Um, and we'll get to everything in this episode. But like, comment, subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you have seen this whole series, or just an Alien fan in general, comment down below what you liked about it. I know that, again, it's a completely different take, but with Romulus last year and now Alien Earth, the Alien franchise can grow a lot more. And I mentioned this in my horror franchise one, so if you hadn't seen that one, go back and check that out. But I think telling different stories now, I mean, you had video games that, like Alien Isolation, which takes place before Aliens, where Ripley's daughter is going out to, to see where she is. She could potentially find her or whatever. So there's a lot of different stories you can tell. Like Romulus told of the story before Aliens, where they deep spaced out and found the alien cocoon, but they didn't go and find Ripley. Merely by design, obviously, as we'll get to see this here in this episode. So Alien Earth takes place 2 years before the original Alien movie. So this is a timeline between Covenant and Alien, but a couple of years before that. So what we know is that Earth was aware of these creatures. Now, how so? We're not sure. We only know from what happened in Covenant. And again, hopefully there's talks about doing, season 2. There's talks about doing a sequel to Covenant that will kind of bridge the whole gap. There's also talk of Aliens 5. Sigourney Weaver is actually in talks with them right now. I've heard rumors that if they do that, the last 2 Alien movies, which was Alien 3 and Resurrection, will kind of get wasted by the waste side. So hopefully that is what the case is. But anyway, Alien Earth takes place 2 years before the Nostromo finds LV-426 from the distress call, and then we all know what happens after that. Ripley's the only one that survives. So this has nothing to do with the Nostromo or Ripley. This is a completely new cast. There's a whole new angle to everything, and now we kind of know a little bit more about Weyland Yutani than we did before. And again, with Prometheus and Covenant, we already kind of know a little bit more, but now we kind of get a little bit more detail, because obviously, we've never had something that has taken place on Earth. We've always jettisoned from Earth to outer space, but we've never actually talked about an alien on Earth. So this is quite an interesting concept. So in the year 2020, so 5 companies control Earth and the colonized solar system. So Now, there is a vast solar system, uh, and there's five companies that are controlling them. However, there are two on Earth that are vitally vying for supremacy. That would be Prodigy Corp, run by Boy Calvara, calls himself Boy Wonder. This is played by Samuel Blanken. His Prodigy company and his theories are looking for ways for humanity's pursuit of immortality. And there are three paths that he and his company have chosen to try and do that. Cyborgs, humans enhanced with biometrical body parts. Okay. Synthetics, fully artificial beings endowed with intelligence. Okay, we've seen that. Or hybrids, which in this show they use. So these are synthetic bodies containing transferred human consciousness. So, you know, this Boy Wonder is looking for the ultimate, dream of being immortal. Obviously, as humans, we are not immortal, but he is looking for a way to cheat death and make it so that all human beings can survive for forever. Meanwhile, you have Weyland-Yutani, who is merciless in her pursuit of uh, world domination, or even probably solar system domination. But we're jumping ahead here because we don't really know all of her interior motives. She kind of pops in and out. So, all right. So the first episode, we see the USCSS Magnat, a Weyland-Yutani spaceship, coming back to Earth after a 65-year mission to obtain extraterrestrial specimens. And as we know from watching horror movies, and especially Aliens, it's never, ever a good thing to try and contain extraterrestrial species. It just never works out. So that is the premise of the very beginning of the show, as a malfunction results in some species and sends the ship hurtling out of control toward Earth. So you have this crew who is on their way back. They are happy to be coming back to Earth, and obviously something happens, a malfunction somewhere in the system, and it breaks free some species. A xenomorph is launched, and all hell breaks loose on this ship. Moreau, played by Bombay Singh, is ultimately the head security officer on the ship, and is Yutani's eyes and ears. And basically, his mission is to get those specimens safely back to Earth for her. Well, he happens to wind up being the lone survivor. He goes into a panic room and survives the crash. So now we know that the ship has crashed to Earth, and we all know what's going to happen next. But meanwhile, before that, we have on Earth at the Neverland Research Island. This is where Prodigy is working on their human immortality. So they have 6 terminally ill children. The launch of the hybrid um, from Prodigy. And so basically they're transforming their minds and implanting them in uh, these hybrids, which are more, uh, obviously these kids are really, really young, so their minds are going into these full, like adult bodies, but their minds will still be themselves. They will still have, like our first subject is Wendy. She's 6 years old, and she becomes the leader of the group of 6. Um, they're the doctors, Dame Sylvia, played by Essie Davis, and her husband Arthur, David, played by David Resdall, are very apprehensive about trying this experiment, but um, they go ahead and do it, and the boy wonder um, really takes a liking to um, Wendy. Um, the reason why her name is Wendy is because, so her original name was Marcy, but and now as a growing hybrid, she wanted to be called Wendy. And the reason why was because every night the boy wonder would, over the loudspeaker, read them Peter Pan. So basically, Wendy, who was tactically a little bit more advanced than the others, became the leader. So she nicknamed them, her group, the Lost Boys, conveniently. Um, so the rest of them are as follows. A Slightly, played by Adarash Gobro, Nibs, played by Lily Newmark, Curly, played by um, Aaron James, and Smee, played by Jacob Asjay. So they, and there's a few others that come in as well to play in a bigger role. So, basically they're learning from the doctors, but they also have a mentor, um, and a guardian angel, basically. Kirsch, played by Timothy Olyphant. And Timothy plays Kirsch so well. He is obviously a hybrid. He is the head of security for the Boy Wonder. And he is very, very on top of things, very alert to everything that goes on. And he is protective of his flock. And subsequently all of his soldiers as well. So when the ship crash lands, the Boy Wonder sends out his hybrids to investigate, and what they find is a very complex and confusing time for these young kids who have never seen destruction like this before, or eventually will see these alien species. So as we go along, there is another storyline that comes in. Marcy's older brother, Joe, is a part of the medic group that goes in with the Marines. He is attacked by some of the species, including the xenomorph. Wendy realizes that her brother is on the ship when somebody tells her that, or at least Wendy, that there is the army's in here, and she remembers that her brother was a medic on this team. So she now, um, even though he really isn't going to remember her because now she's in a different body, she decides to go and try to find him. So she eventually finds him, and kind of saves him, and then she now tries to convince her that it is her. And obviously he's so taken back by it, like, I thought you were dead, so to speak. So that is basically the introduction of the first episode. The second episode is just them trying to escape being killed. The Xenomorph has some really interesting kills in this second one, and basically people are starting to try to learn, what is going on in this ship, basically. The third episode is where we finally see Moreau saves Wendy and Joe at first, and he does that by trying to freeze the Xenomorph, but then is chased off by Kirsch, who is trying to protect Wendy and Joe, and that is when Moreau calls Yutani and tells her that this is not going to be easy. Now they have control of the specimens, where she emphatically tells him, no, you need to go and get those specimens, or at least get me a specimen so that we can take the advantage. So he tries to figure out how to do that. Meanwhile, Wendy and Joe are separated again from Kirsch when the Xenomorph shows back up, and the Xenomorph attacks Joe and stabs him with its tail, and that prompts Wendy to attack the Xenomorph, and she eventually kills the Xenomorph, but in doing so damages herself by taking, obviously, the acid that the alien bleeds, and now has to be redesigned. So the Boy Wonder makes sure that when they redesigned her, that she was going to be stronger and more equipped to deal with the Xenomorph. In doing so, it made her super more aware of her surroundings and gave her some more abilities, which we will get into later on. The fourth episode, the group has entered the lab area. They encounter a octopus-like creature, what they're calling Oculus, and there it was. So this thing is like an eyeball, and it basically has tentacles like an octopus. It had embedded itself in a cat. When it saw them, it wanted to plant itself in them. They were luckily able to stop that, and Nip was the one who was able to stop it from entering her. But it caused a very chain reaction to her programming, and I'll get to that in the next episode, episode 5, because it's basically, again, showing how the child brain works, sometimes. So anyway, they wind up capturing this thing, which winds up inside this glass container. But Kirsch is kind of curious about this thing. Like, it knows it's self-aware, and it knows that it has like a hive mentality where it's very intelligent. So he experiments. There's a sheep in the lab. It digs the eyeball out of the sheep, reattaches itself, and now has a different and higher functioning body, and shows Kirsch that it is very intelligent and it knows what Kirsch is thinking, and so on. All right. So while that was going on, Slightly ran into Moreau, who had planted a little device on him. And so Moreau was in the ear of Slightly. He was telling him that, hey, this is your inner conscience. And again, this is a young kid listening to an adult, and he's trying to get Slightly to help him get a species. And he, again, a child is going to, he acts like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, and so on and so forth. And, it's basically, this is the only way Moreau's going to be able to get his hands on one. But he has to convince the little boy mentality to get it through. Episode 5 basically is a flashback to what happened on the ship. The ship was sabotaged. Moreau sought out the saboteur, kills the saboteur, but by then the crew basically had been wiped out, and Moreau was the only one left to survive. Episode 6. Nibs is having issues. She tells the doctor, Dawn, that she was pregnant. Where she got this illusion, or where her mind went to think that she was pregnant, you'll never know. So the boy wonder makes sure that they try to obviously delete any memory or any strand of conscience that could have caused such a thought that she could have been pregnant, which obviously clearly she was not, but maybe her experience with the Oculus triggered a memory. Maybe she was an abused child. We don't know. We don't also know how old she was, because only we really know what Marcy was, Wendy. So this one, Wendy now is starting to get a sense of what the xenomorph and the xenomorph eggs have in common. So she starts to try to communicate to them. Like, her wavelength now is she can actually communicate, or at least try to communicate with the xenomorph. And it is fascinating to see her visceral reactions to how she interacts with the xenomorph. There's a meeting between Cavalier and Yutani. This does not go well for Yutani, as the boy wonder basically outwits her and is willing to give her the species in 6 weeks because of quarantine measures. She doesn't like it. Also, there's some money exchanged as well, and it doesn't really sit well with Yutani, but Cavalier is who he is, a brash young man who owns Prodigy Company. And he now controls a species that nobody has ever seen before. And Yutani wants it back in the worst way, because Yutani and Waylon knew what was out there. So Kirsch was on this trip with Cavalier, but Kirsch also asked a young man named Isaac to watch over the specimens and feed and water the specimens. Well, something obviously goes wrong with that. Isaac he wanted to be named Isaac because he loved Isaac Newton. He thought he was as smart as him, but he was not so lucky. And basically, something goes wrong with the feed. He winds up getting trapped inside this flying bug nest, and is ultimately, acid killed. So now his body has the door open. So his body is jettisoned in between the door and him trying while he was trying to escape that. Meanwhile, another door is opened, and a few more specimens get out. Slightly in this episode is now forced to help Moreau because Moreau found his family, who Moreau convinced he was still alive, and then obviously they talked to each other. So now he needed to follow Moreau, or he was going to kill his family. So Slightly now is being told by Moreau to gather a human, or grab one of the humans that is there and get them close enough to the xenomorph eggs. So he's like, well, how am I going to do that? And he's like, you got to figure it out. So Arthur was checking on the status of the kids when he noticed that there was their signals were offline. And the last time he knew, they were down, or some of them were down by the lab. So he starts to go. He runs into Slightly, who says, yeah, I think something has happened. You should look into it. He gets Arthur to go in, but then shows him toward the xenomorph eggs, and then locks the door behind him. And then, of course, the face hugger comes out and attacks Arthur. And we all know what happens after that, which we will get into. Now, we are in 7th episode. Slightly now needs to deliver Arthur to Moreau. Smee, another kid, shows up at Slightly's door and now asks to help Slightly get Arthur off the island, basically. As they're doing that, they run into Kirsch, who has been monitoring this whole thing and surprisingly hasn't said anything to the Boy Wonder. He's been very nonchalant about everything. Like, he is so curious about everything that he has seen or read through scanning stuff. So he decides to help them get Arthur to the shore to see what happens. When they get Arthur to the shore, the facehugger falls off, and Arthur, the next morning, it feels fine. But we all know that isn't going to work in this, right? So Arthur now is trying to figure out what is going on, and that is when we see the chest burster. It comes out and takes off the island before Moreau can get to the island. Kirsch shows Cavalier the Oculus and tells him that he was the one that started the whole lab incident. And then he shows him the footage. Now, again, the Oculus was trying to save Isaac, but obviously Isaac didn't know why he was trying to be alerted by the Oculus in the sheep's body. Cavalier becomes very curious about this and wonders what could happen if we put it in a human body. So Kirsch is like, well, why would you want to know? And then he was kind of like, maybe you're onto something. Moreau and Yutani soldiers try to storm the island, but when Wendy realizes this, she calls on the xenomorph, which winds up taking out the army along the shore. And then when Moreau and the rest of the army get inside to confront Wendy, she contacts the xenomorph and takes out everyone but Moreau. Moreau and Kirsch have a struggle fight. Basically, both guys are brutally injured, and obviously Kirsch is fixed up. Moreau is under arrest and put in the imprisoned cell. And then we get to episode 8. Wendy, Nibs, Slightly, and Smee Curly were now in prison. So the boy Cavalier has imprisoned them to try and control the xenomorph and the specimens. But he knows that Wendy can control them, but he wants control of it. He tells them a story about when he was 6 and how he built his first humanoid hybrid. That eventually killed his abusive father. So obviously this kid had plenty of purpose behind, and then subsequently now owns, a bajillion-dollar company. Cavalier, his right-hand man is called Atom, played by Adrian Edmonds. He, you could tell he was definitely a hybrid like Kirsch, but he didn't act like Kirsch. Kirsch was very rigid. Atom was very human-like. He, had many, you wouldn't think that he was quite a hybrid, but we all know that he is. They have a discussion about how they can lure a human into an area where the Oculus can take over, because Cavalier was insistent on trying to make the Oculus, go into a human to see if it could talk and communicate. So Atom winds up going to see Joe, because Joe had been looking to try to get Wendy off the island because he was trying to save his sister, or what is his sister. He tells Joe that Cavalier needs to see him. He wants to talk about some conditions um, for taking Wendy off the island. So Joe's like, okay, well, we'll see. So Joe goes to Cavalier's office. There's the sheep with the Oculus, and it triggers Wendy in there. So, like, again, she has this wide range of emotion, but she's also in tune with a lot of things that are going on. She then sends the Xenomorph to go after the Boy Wonder. Meanwhile, she's able to escape with the children. They go after Monroe. She's going after Joe. So she winds up obviously getting to the office long enough uh, right before the Oculus is about to attack. Now the Oculus is loose. It is running around. It's looking for a host. But the only host that it can find is Joe. Atom is there to try and stop Wendy and keep Joe in, but Wendy stops him, freezes him, basically with some kind of a mind thrust. Sends Atom basically into a reset mode. And so eventually Cavalier is chased down by the Xenomorph, but he does not get killed. So finally we see at the very end of the season, Wendy has captured the Doctor, Dawn, Cavalier, Atom, Kirsch, and Moreau. And they're in this prison. They are guarded by the two Xenomorphs. So the original Xenomorph that was in the lab, and then the little chest burst became a Xenomorph. And now she has them as a watchdog. And she declares to them, with Nibs, Curly, Slightly, Smee, and Joe by her side, she declares, now we rule. It is quite an interesting ending, and I cannot wait to see what season 2 looks like. Also, in that final episode, we see the Oculus find its way to the beach where Arthur's dead body is, and finds its way into Arthur's eyeball, takes his eyeball out, and basically winds up resuscitating him. Crazy. Crazy, crazy. But it could help Cavalier figure out if this thing is ultra smart. So again, this show has a lot of potential for more expanded alien interaction, and I'm all for it. I've loved Alien. I loved Alien. Aliens 2 was amazing. Alien 3 and Alien Resurrection I could do without. I know this is going to be a horrible take, but I did like Prometheus and Covenant. I just did. I think again, going back and trying to circumvent the what happened in the first film, it's very difficult. It's kind of like what Star Wars had to deal with when the prequels came out, and everybody was like, ugh, the originals are so much better. And then eventually everybody loved the prequels because the sequels weren't good. But those two movies, Prometheus was supposed to be a non-alien movie, but basically it was Alien. and then Covenant kind of follows in behind. Romulus, which just came out last year, and has a sequel already in progress, takes place between Alien and Aliens because of Weyland-Yutani looking for the xenomorph, somehow knowing it was out in space somewhere, but left Ripley alone to be captured, by Sherlock. Or was it Sherlock? Maybe they knew that Ripley was out there and eventually said, well, okay, let's go get her. Maybe she knows. Maybe she has one of them inside of her. Who knows? And that's obviously the basis of 3, where she did get impregnated, and 4 was just a money grab and a half. Just crazy. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Obviously, spoilers everywhere, but I thought it was a good show. If you liked it, comment down below what you liked about it. Are you excited for season 2? Because I know I am. And are you, looking forward to what Alien is going to be? Now, there is some conjecture that they will circumvent Alien versus Predator because of what Predator Badlands may introduce. Or Killer of Killers introduced the fact that there was an alien on board their spacecraft at the very end. So, could we see a possible Alien versus Predator down the road that will kind of circumvent the other 2 out of existence because they were just terrible? Perhaps. So both Alien and Predator have such a huge following and has a few storylines that they can go with, and a bunch more, because now with Alien Earth, we now have different species of alien, so we're not just dealing with the xenomorph anymore. So, all right, that is all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all at the movies.
You like that, baby? Let him know where I came from, yeah!
See you next time. Bye.
Waiting for you. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Hasta la vista, baby.
That's all, folks.